Yo, you wrote something that I read that I enjoyed, where you kind of did a legitimate deep dive into success rates of drafting quarterbacks. I believe you limited it to the top five, but maybe it was even further limited than that. Let me give you the floor and kind of explain the piece.
Yeah, so obviously the local team has a top five pick, top two picked, and we're looking at a quarterback there. I think there's a lot of optimism around the pick, even if we don't know who it's going to be with any certainty. But the hit rates to get a franchise quarterback, using a draft pick even that high is not as good as maybe you might think. I mean, it's a coin flip essentially to get a franchise quarterback, and I'm talking about a quarterback that you draft, he plays well, you extend him a contract. As we're seeing with the Zach Wilson trade, from the Jets, that draft class in particular wasn't very good. And those weren't even, top five draft picks. But, we can look back historically and, we see Peyton Manning's and we see Ryan Leaf's. We see, Jamarcus Russell's. I mean, there are chances to bust even when you're picking that high. And for me, it was higher than I expected going in, and I think that's something that you really do have to you have to set your expectations accordingly. And even analytics that are around there, Aaron Schatz has his Q-base projection, and the bust rates for even the top pick is Caleb Williams is relatively high, and the chance of him being an elite quarterback are relatively low. And, I think just everyone needs to take that into account.
I agree. So can we dive in specifically to these guys and kind of what you think, what the data tells us about the fellas in this draft?
Yeah, so Caleb Williams obviously has the best chance to play at an elite level, which is for the particulars of Aaron's post, and he's done it for many years. It's how many total yards above a replacement player per attempt would they have? They look at a bunch of factors, the combine, some comparable players coming out of school, et cetera. Caleb Williams, chance of a bust, almost 30%. Chance to be an elite player, 20%. That's pretty high. I mean, the chance to bust with the number one overall pick being 30%, to me, I think is very high. Drake May's bust potential is a 50-50 chance. That's exorbitant. Jaden Daniels, 38%. I mean, these are large chances to bust. Mm-hmm. And when you think about what would happen to a franchise if they took a swing on a franchise quarterback with a top five pick and it doesn't work out, we've seen it here. I mean, it could literally set the franchise back years in terms of getting back to respectable contention, such as making the playoffs.
Have you all gone back and watched those based off of what the bust percentage was and how many people lived up to that? Or
yeah, I have. And, I remember doing, like I said, Aaron's done this for many years. We looked at, I remember I did a story about this with Marcus Mariota and how, even his bust rate was relatively high. And a lot of people said, that's silly. I mean, he's going to be great. And he was okay. I mean, he spent his first, 5 seasons with Tennessee, but then bounced around. And I wouldn't necessarily, maybe I wouldn't call him a bust per se, but I think we can all agree he hasn't been the franchise quarterback that you would expect to get at that level. Mm-hmm. And again, I mean, these are just percentages, and it's only one person's projection. And, we've been listening because of where we are. We've been hearing about this number 2 pick for months, yeah. And who's the better play at number
Since
2? And we know all the goods and bads for each player at this point. But I do think the contracts show, how well a player has been perceived, and historically they line up pretty well with what Aaron's been doing. in terms of, are these players franchise quarterbacks? And I'm not even talking about like guys at like Peyton Manning level or Andrew Luck level. I'm just talking about a guy that's better than average. The franchise isn't trying to actively replace him. They sign him to a second-year deal. He starts the games, and he's good. Not great, but good. Even that doesn't happen as often as perhaps some people might think.
I'm with you. We're talking with our friend Neil Greenberg here. You can follow him on X and Instagram at @ngreenberg. I don't know that we've asked you this, but I did notice a funny tweet you had where somebody claimed that J.J. McCarthy would be the analytical pick. I find that hard to believe. I think whatever sort of metrics you're looking at that Michigan team that was just so loaded on all sides of the ball, like I just feel like that would skew the analytics to me. Who would you pick and why?
That's a great question. I'm so glad I don't have to make this pick. I think Jaden Daniels would probably be my choice. There's concerns, obviously. The sacks are certainly a concern. We've seen how much that can manifest itself at the NFL level. I don't know if there's necessarily a safe pick, but for me, I think Daniels is, his completion rate was high. He had a very solid yards per attempt. He can rush the ball. Not to say that he's the next Lamar Jackson, but to be able to have that dual purpose type of skill set, I think is important in today's NFL. And I think also, and I think I said this when Marcus Mariota was signed, he has a little bit of that too. I mean, he's not a spring chicken, so he's not going to be running all over the field, like perhaps he did in years past. But, Mariota could run a little bit. And I had said then when they brought him to Washington that maybe that was a little bit of a tip as to what type of skill set they're looking for, because with all the new faces and up and down the organization, and then you have a new quarterback coming in, like you only want to install the offense once. And I don't think you want that big of a difference, if Mariota starts and then the quarterback comes in later, or the quarterback's playing and then you have to bring in Mariota later. Like, you want one system, and I think Daniels probably is most similar to Mariota in terms of being able to do that part of it.
When I said that, people flipped out.
Yeah, they did, and it seemed like, hey man, Neil's siding with you. But ultimately, what is it that, because we've talked to people now that have said that Jaden should be compared more to Caleb and not the other guys in the draft, that they are above them. What are your thoughts on that?
We don't know anything. I mean, it's so hard to say who's who, and you brought up a good point in terms of who they're playing with. I mean, in college, athleticism is a big differentiator, right? Like, if you have very talented wideouts, they're going up against cornerbacks that perhaps aren't as talented. That skill gap is much, much narrower in the NFL. I'm just guessing like everybody else. There's, even with Caleb Williams at number 1, there's no consensus number 2 pick. I mean, would you be surprised? Like, would you be shocked, just for argument's sake, if Bo Nix outperforms Jaden Daniels or J.J. McCarthy or Drake Maye, over the next 2 or 3 years? It's not likely to happen, but would I be shocked? No, because, it also depends on where they go and what kind of scheme and who's around them, et cetera. I mean, I'd be just guessing at this point.